Jay Baba, I just wanted to welcome everyone to this celebration of the life of Gary Kleiner with his beloved Baba. I'd like to start with a short video and just to give an idea of some photographs that kindly were provided by Gary's family, his wife Mara, and a few other people contributed. I think what we'll do is just go ahead and open with some comments and some memories from some of the people in the group here. Ellis Pines, would you like to speak
Oh,
first?
I feel very honored. Thank you so much. Philip is going to talk about his first trip. He was Gary's first contact in our Baba group in Chicago back in 1974. And I actually met Gary at Union Station because Philip, Susan, and Gary were headed to New York in order to go on that first India trip. But I think there are three things that I wanted to share, and they may be themes that are going to come up. And obviously, there's going to be, I think, a lot of talk about Erich. After one of his early times over there with Erich, Gary told me that Erich said about him that you're becoming something very fine. If you could only see how fine a person and Baba you are becoming. And Gary said that Baba himself said about Erich, he said, I didn't have to do so much work with you because Gaimai and your family had done so much to make you who you are, so that when he came to Baba, he was ready just to jump into the work and to do what he did. And that I could see also in Gary's family. And I think those like here, like Bruce and Philip, and those of us in Chicago who knew Gary's mother, and to a certain extent also Gary's father, because at the end, you might remember, he came and he participated in Amritithi, and how moving that was to Gary, but especially his mother. Whenever you were over at the Kleiners' home, she just showered you with love. Food would magically appear. Had she been cooking for us? We were just over there. We just dropped in after some kind of game or something. Um, and I wanted to say something about games. Um, and long before the volleyball, Gary had established himself as such a representative of that aspect of Meher Baba, the Leela, Baba's love of sports. And one of my favorite memories is how Gary said we were playing touch football, and it was like a 3-on-3 touch football. And Gary chose me, who was never a first chosen in anything sports, and his brother, who at the time was Moshe, who at that time was 10 years old, to play everybody else. Okay. So it's the three of us against everybody else, which means it's Gary really against everybody else. And he puts me at quarterback, which essentially nobody's going to rush me because everybody's trying to guard Gary as he runs all around and everything like that. And finally, he's gone all the way down to where the goal is, comes back, and I basically do like that, tip it to him, and he runs all the way for a touchdown. So this is Kleiner at his best, and he could turn anything into a sport. I mean, throwing a balloon around, and all of a sudden it becomes a game and things like that. He told me a story because some people had problems with being playing the volleyball, and he told me this story. He said an Australian was playing in Maribad. I hope I'm not offending anybody in telling this story. He was very tall, and Gary was screaming at him because he was right at the net and he could just go bang and he could spike it all the time. And he was being timid. He wasn't playing aggressively. And Gary screaming, spike them up. What are you doing? You can do that. You can do it. And this guy kneels in front of Gary after the game. And he says, kneeling, this guy is almost as tall as Gary is standing up. And he says, but Gary, it doesn't matter. And Gary says, I know it doesn't matter, but we have to play like it matters. And I think that says so much about Gary, and that he could just do this wonderful acting. And he acted in a lot of our plays too in Chicago, where he could become whatever he had to become. Well, there's so much more to say, and I'm sure you'll say it. And my gosh, irreplaceable, Jai Meher Baba.
Hey,
Beautiful.
Baba. It's really fun to hear you talk, Ellis, and also to demonstrate every Chicagoan's deep appreciation of the nuances of sport and political elections. But,
Yes.
Anyway, good to see you.
Yes,
Hey, Bob.
good to see you, Bruce. Yes, yes. Vote on Tuesday. Take care.
Jai Baba, absolutely.
Hey, Baba.
Jai Baba. And Philip, did you want to speak a little bit about Gary, or a lot?
Yes,
It's
yes,
wonderful.
I'm happy to, and Susan is here also with me. It helped me with putting together a couple of memories. Can you hear me okay? Is my sound all right?
Your sound is great.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. I'm going to read something I wrote for the family, there's a book being prepared. So I'll read it a little bit more formal than Ellis. Gary Kleiner bounded into our lives one day, and that's the right verb to use, given his energy and enthusiasm. I think it was in 1973 when I was volunteering as staffing the Chicago Meher Baba Information Center, which in those days was a rented room in a building on South Michigan Avenue called the Fine Arts Building. Gary had come from Carbondale, where he was in college at Southern Illinois University, and I think he might have heard of Baba there and learned that there was a center in Chicago. He had had some connection with the spiritual group Ananda Marg, which was an Indian spiritual movement popular in some places at that time. But it was clear from my long and animated conversation with him at the center that day that he was very drawn to Baba. Indeed, Susan remembers that he came to see us at our apartment on Addison Street within a day or two of that first encounter, wanting to hear more stories, especially stories about Baba. After that, he became a regular participant in our little Chicago group whenever he was in town. And through him, Susan and I also had some contact with his memorable family, as Ellis mentioned, his very hardworking immigrant parents, and his two younger brothers, Jerry, and at that time he was called Irving, although I think he later changed his name. Susan recalls Gary telling her that he was born in Volodymyr Volynski, which was then in Russia, but now in Ukraine. But the family left there when he was 2 years old. At one point, we attended a very memorable Passover Seder at the Kleiner's apartment. And we can never forget Mama Kleiner's cooking, including the only homemade gefilte fish I've ever had, and her constant exhortation of Gary's youngest brother, Irving, eat. It was clear that she—
Irving, eat!
Yes, we both remember that vividly. It was clear that she doted on all three boys. Papa Moshe Kleiner, however, was not happy with his eldest son's spiritual inclinations, and it would be decades before he changed his mind about this, at least from what I've heard. Gary told me a very, very beautiful and emotional story of Moshe's trip to India when he finally came after Gary's mother's death, and his wonderful interaction with Erich, and just the change that came over him. And it's a story that I hope somebody will tell today, because I heard it secondhand from Gary, but maybe somebody knows the details better, but it's a very touching and important story. Because as Ellis said, I think the family kind of prepared Gary. Gary was part of Maher Players of Chicago, our amateur theater company. And in the winter of 1975, he played in the musical that Rob Tomorrow wrote, Wise Men, A Circus of the Self with Songs, which Ellis and Susan and I, and probably some others who are here were in, which was set in a down at the heel traveling circus in the Midwest during the Depression. Gary was cast as Tricky the Clown, a bouncy madcap role that suited him well. I can still visualize him in his classic polka-dotted clown costume with a big red nose and clown makeup. The three wise men have come to the circus following a star and looking for the Christ. It's kind of complicated story. But they briefly think that Tricky might be who they're looking for, or else an arch villain who has kidnapped the troupe's three ringmasters. But he turns out to be just himself, Tricky the Clown. But Gary was very into the role, and it was a memorable performance. When we met Gary, I had already been to India twice, and Susan had been once, and we were planning another trip for the summer of 1974. Gary asked if he could go with us, and we all flew from JFK Airport in New York.
Can I have this picture?
Yes, Susan's going to hold up
Where's your camera?
a picture here. Well, here. This is a photograph of us. Now that's Gary, of course, on the left, and me on the right, and that's my mother next to Gary, and a cousin, a young cousin of Susan's, next to my mom and between my mom and me. And yeah, Gary looks very much himself, and that was when we were.
Well, that's what he looked like then.
Yes. Gary asked if he could go with us, and we all flew from JFK Airport on July 25th, 1974. We landed in Delhi and spent several weeks sightseeing in North India, which was something that we had done on our previous trips, and Gary was interested in doing too. We don't remember our whole itinerary, but it definitely included Agra and the Taj Mahal. And we also went to Kashmir on my only trip there, Srinagar, Kashmir, where we foolishly booked a houseboat through the government tourist office instead of bargaining with the many touts on the lakeside. And because official government rates were high for our backpacker tourist budget, we could only afford a Class C boat, which turned out to be a very rundown affair, incongruously named King of World. It was shabby and very unsanitary, and both Gary and I soon became horribly sick to our stomachs. Susan, for some reason, did not succumb.
I did not drink water.
Yeah. Despite this, we did all the requisite Kashmir sightseeing, riding shikara boat to Shalimar Gardens, hiring horses to go to Gulmarg. And Gulmarg was known in those days for having, quote unquote, the world's highest golf course, and Gary played a round of golf on it. And later we asked him about it, and he said something to the effect that, well, it might be the highest golf course in the world, but it's certainly one of the worst. And then we went up to another place called Killenmarg, where we were hoping to catch a glimpse of the world's second highest mountain, K2, but it was obscured by clouds. In any case, all our travels in India were but a warm-up to the main event of going to Ahmednagar and then to Mehrabad and Meherzad. This was before the Pilgrim Center was built, the old Pilgrim Center. And I think we stayed once again at the sleazy but beloved Dowlat Lodge Hotel in Nagar, across from Sarosh Talkies and Adi K. Irani's Kings Road office, which is now the Avatar Meher Baba Trust compound. Since we knew the ropes, we must have taught them to Gary, renting bicycles and occasionally auto rickshaws, and then riding out every day to either Meherabad or Meherazad on the mostly empty roads of those days to visit Baba's places and be with his mandali, and then hanging out at night with other pilgrims and sometimes with Adi Irani himself at Sarosh Canteen, which was Ahmednagar's own version of Rick's Cafe in Casablanca. This is a place that everyone went to. What I especially remember of our several-week pilgrimage was watching Gary fall in love for the second time. I had seen him fall in love with Meher Baba, and this time we saw him fall in love with Erich, with whom he wisely chose to spend as much time as he possibly could. When Susan and I left to return to our jobs in Chicago, Gary stayed on, and then on and on. Though it bewildered and upset his family, we understood and respected Gary's choice, recalling Baba saying that one of the high roads to him was being in constant company with the saints and lovers of God and rendering them wholehearted service. He must have had countless opportunities to do this, as well as, of course, to become Meherabad's official volleyball coach. May his irrepressible Grisha energy continue to bounce in our hearts. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai.
While
So,
we still have the Chicago people,
yeah,
could I, first, one thing, Philip mentioned a book. I can put a link in the chat.
please.
Mary is making a handmade book for Sophia. So if anybody has stories, Philip wrote this up. You could email to that address, and then she's going to create a handmade book for Sophia with different people's stories. And then before we lose the Chicago people, thank you so much. You might remember Doug McCaig and Kate. So if you can just keep a good thought for Kate, she is in the process of dying at this moment. She's in hospice and stopped eating. And Scott can say more, but I just heard her voice a couple of days ago. She's just said, "I love you." And Doug was saying he can feel all the love from all corners of the world. So just keep a good thought for her. Thanks.
Jai Baba. Thank you, Fire. Well, I know we do have some of these people here. I know Bruce. Bruce, do you have something you want to share?
Well, I can only echo things we already have heard from Ellis and Philip. Hello, Philip and Susan. Haven't seen you in ages. You look fantastic. Sorry about that. Yeah, Gary was a great sportsman, and I have here in my possession a replica of the most recent companion ball that Gary carried with him. He always had a ball of some kind, maybe handball size or occasionally a tennis ball, but usually something he could stuff in a backpack or in his pocket. And at any moment, he could start a game of toss or, get that kind of thing going. He was a wonderful character and someone I had a deep personal connection with from the early times in my life with Baba. One of the joys that I had because of that was becoming intimate with his family and his dear mom and dad and his brothers. Saw Jerry recently when Gary passed away here in Nashville. And you would, as Ellis said, you would go to the Kleiner's apartment. And, I did this often as I would go to meet Mrs. Kleiner, and then we'd go shopping so that she could fill up a suitcase that I would then bring to Gary in India, goodies of every variety you can imagine. And but before all that happened, you know, you go back into the kitchen, you sit down, and you know, there would be 5 things cooking on the stove, you know, or just staying warm, and then you would be feeded with, you know, homemade Russian salad, beets, cutlets, you know, all kinds of fantastic food. And this is all from a lady. I mean, it's just saying a little about where Gary came from, you know. I think I could possibly count the number of times I saw Gary's mother sitting down, you know, in all the years and times that that I spent with them. Tireless person who gave of herself to her children so completely. Is fantastic. And he was the complete and full recipient of that kind of dedication and love, and obviously was worthy of that, because, you know, that's what he got from her. Very moving and loving lady. So anyway, I had that, and I had Gary was very important in my own connection in my Baba life, and in my working life. And we spent many happy times together over the years. I don't have a particular Gary story that would, you know, make people go, oh, you know, something like that. But just the ongoing love and being such a big part of my own Baba story, and the part of so many Baba stories out there. What a lovely guy. And I just want to say for everybody who wasn't, as most of you were not, when Gary passed away, what a beautiful death. If I still get kind of choked up. It was such a beautiful death that, you know, a story could be written about it. There's a very sort of accelerated and relaxed, in a way, demise, and at every moment when something was essentially needed, you know, Baba provided like that. Very beautiful, very beautiful. And in those last couple of days, you know, I think it was Mara Kleiner, you know, who said, you know, off the cuff, you know, or maybe it was Kebby and Kebby Boos and Ralph Brown were on the phone when Gary, after he had passed away, and she said the love was, you could cut the love with a cake knife. You know, it was so thick and so richly felt. Real beautiful thing. And I just want to say to everybody else out there who I haven't seen in a long time, especially you old Chicago people, what a joy. That's all I'm going to say.
It's beautiful, Bruce. Thank you. I'm so glad you brought that up. There is something just, I'm a nurse, but I also had been with friends who were preparing for the person to pass away, and there's nothing to describe that experience of sacred love that just, like you said, it whoever said it, you can feel it. It's like cutting with a cake knife. It's just so incredibly rich and sweet. Baba, thank you. Bruce, that was wonderful. I don't know if anybody else would like to share. I've got a little video of some photo. Oh, there we go. Ira. Jay Baba, Ira. You just need to unmute yourself, dear.
Okay, great.
There you are.
Hi, everyone. So I was in India for like maybe 3 months. It must have been 1995. And during that time in 1995, since I was there for that long, I volunteered with the school nearby. You know, the it was like elementary to a higher grade school, and I was teaching the kids how to do speeches. I was teaching them English, you know, so they could do speeches. So, in other words, my background on this is Toastmasters, and I was trying to teach the students, you know, the higher level students, to get up and give speeches, you know, to each other in the class, and those skills, and also how to speak extemporaneously or in English. So now I was doing this at the school, and so I'm about to, so now then I was thinking, well, now this is going fine for like 2-3 weeks, and I needed somebody to delegate to. I needed to continue with this. I needed some kind of continuation. So I spoke to Gary. Somehow I felt, you know, that he'd like it, and he did. Okay, so him and Mira, I think that they were married then, and she might have been pregnant. So they came once, you know, we were there once a week. So they came to watch, I think. And then the next time, Gary, you know, was the host or the MC. And you know something? Speaking or giving speeches or speaking to a group, I think Gary loved that. Okay, that's where that was his. So, you know, this was my last time there doing this session with the kids, and Gary and his wife were there. And I saw Gary, you know, acting as the moderator, and I realized, well, he has such vitality and enthusiasm, like you were saying, but the first impression that came to me, he has Eric's, and he absorbed Eric's energy. Okay, that's what because that's how I felt. He absorbed being with Eric. He absorbed his energy, and that was flowing out to these kids as he was talking to them. Okay, and it was very sweet. Okay, he I don't know how long that continued, but it was great, you know, because he had his own occupation there doing his things. Okay, and it was great that, you know, that him and Mira, you know, Mira had a background in education, so she must have helped Gary in some way. But it was just thrilling seeing Gary get up and talk to the kids like this. Okay, thanks.
Jay Vaughn.
All right, sure.
Thank you, Ira. That was
Right.
beautiful.
Ruth,
Yes.
I do want to add one little
Oh, good.
bit,
Please.
if I could.
Yes,
This
please.
kind of follows what Philip was saying about Gary's decision to stay in India, and he became so close to Eric. Well, when I first went to India, it was in 1980, and one of the things that I did on that trip, I was there for 4 months, and was go on the Ellora, go to the Ellora caves, and of course, by that time, Eric was no longer giving these tours, but Gary had started doing that with a little Gary modernization twist. So Gary would make arrangements for a luxury bus, right, in Nagar, and he would, organize a group of people, maybe 20 people, however many wanted to go on the excursion, and then on the way, out of Nagar on the longer, more lonely stretches, he would play cassette tapes. So there you were, somewhere still distant from Aurangabad, but you've got a tape of the Beatles, playing, and but the thing that was so special, and these trips, I think I did this probably 3 times with Gary over the years, but it's indelibly imprinted. I can almost recount everything that happened on these journeys, and I'm just going to very quickly give everybody what the itinerary of stops, never mind the other things you see along the way, but you go Ahmednagar, Aurangabad, the mini Taj Mahal just outside Aurangabad. Philip could correct me on the name that I should really be calling it, but the mini Taj is there. Jalalabad Fort, which is spectacular by itself. All these are really. Ellora Caves, Zarzari Zarbaksh Samadhi in Valley of the Saints, Sai Baba's cave above that point. On the way out, one of the burial places of Aurangzeb, there's a mosque there where part of his body is buried, so it is said. And then final stop, approaching Merazad again at Imampur, which was where the last night of the new life was spent before a still substantial walk to Seclusion Hill. But he was a very able and generous tour guide, and had within him, it just felt like the complete story. It felt like he had all the important details with the correct and full focus and appreciation that one might have gotten from Erich on such a trip. I can only compare it to a short little Happy Valley tour that I was on that Erich led once. But anyway, what a delight. And it really speaks to Gary's enthusiasm, his ability, and he enjoyed doing stuff like that, but it was also a really good thing for the people who participated, in other ways. Anyway, thanks, Jay Baba.
Thank you, Jay Baba. What a great tour.
I'm a little bit late myself to this.
Yes,
but-
Ken. Jay Baba.
Hi, Jay Baba. I like to share a few, couple stories at least. I like Bruce. I've known Gary for over 40 years, and I was trying to think of some of the first things I remember, and we all were in the like Bruce, myself, and I see Philip, Susan here. We're all in that Chicago group, and Gary was living in India even when I first came to Baba in 1979. But he would come back in the summers. And one summer in 1982, Gary, I believe this is the year, I asked Ralph, and Ralph told me that he thinks it was 1982. Gary went to Israel, and he went to this yeshiva, this Hasidic yeshiva, and he thought it was really amazing that they were very mystical and whatever. So in I think it was 1983, Gary was back from India, and he came over to my house for dinner in Chicago. And my mom knew Gary by then, but my grandmother was coming to dinner, and she had never met Gary before. And we didn't talk about Mayor Baba in front of my grandmother. I mean, even from my mom, really. But so my grandmother was like a Zionist type of person, right? And so I said, when we were having dinner, I said, so Grandma, Gary was just in Israel last year, and he was in a yeshiva, and my grandmother was really impressed with that. I said, oh, that's so great, and he said, yeah, I really had a good time. And then she said, well, where are you living now? And she said, well, I'm living in India. And my grandmother said, why would you live in India when you can live in Israel? And later when we left, Gary was very upset. He said, she doesn't know me well enough to ask me this question. This is personal. And so, we drove over to his house. We went over and, Moish was there and his mom, and she was, I don't remember what we were doing, but so Moish, we're sitting down there and Moish joins us. This is Gary's father. And he looks at me and goes, so Ken, how much do you make? So, to me, that was like a little bit personal, right? But in those days, like in India in the 1980s, it was very, it was so rural out there. And we used to like to take the motorcycle out to Jungli Master's farm, which is really pretty out there, and even further, and sometimes kids would yell at us, Jay Baba, whatever. And I remember Gary saying, we're out there in this kind of beautiful rural farmland, and Gary said to me, Ken, we're just passing through this lifetime. It doesn't matter really what you're doing. We're just passing through. Yeah, remember that. One more thing I could think of, another story is, I was just telling this to Bruce, I think the other day, is, I don't remember the year, it was I think in the 1980s sometime, Gary, I was in the MPC, and Gary asked me to come to his room because there was this night watchman who would give Gary massages, but he wasn't very good at it. He would grab his legs and punch him and whatever. He said, Ken, could you teach this guy some techniques for massaging? So I said, sure, I could try. So we went over that night into Gary's room, and this guy, and I'm showing him, how to just do some, massage stuff for Gary. And he's kind of talking Marathi to Gary a little bit and back and forth. And Gary tells me after a while what he's saying. He said, well, what he's telling me is that this guy was an older guy, right? And he was saying that in the his family with Mama Nagar or Arangan used to make food during Sahabas for Baba, and actually Baba asked him to make food, and he served food for both Baba and Mera family individually, and Baba gave them his blessing. And Gary said, this is the guy who's massaging me. This guy who met Baba, personally got his blessing and served food for him. It was just the irony of that was just crazy, Yeah. So those are just a few things that come to mind, but the millions of things like that, yeah, with him.
Ruth,
Yes.
I just want to chip in one more. I'm sorry. These things are
No,
gonna come
no,
to me
please.
hodgepodge.
That's what we're trying to do. This is great.
Okay. So here's something that, this is what you get with Gary if you, encounter him, whether you're, doing your business, your financial business at the MPC back in the day, or in another way, you know that he was, that he had a number of monikers, I guess. The Kleiner, he's right there with you, probably never more true than it is now. Or later, Gary Kleiner, hustling a vision. These kind of playful, things that would be, I don't know, conversation starters or enders or whatever, for those interesting times you just go sit in his office and hang around. But the thing that I was remembering I wanted to share with everybody was on my first or second trip to India, Erich's brother, Merwan Jaswala, was suffering. I forget at this point exactly what his ailment was, but it was a significant health problem that he had. And at least for many, many months, and maybe more than a year, the prescribed therapy for him was to get, body massage, which was essential to his recovery. And Gary used to go to Pune to spend some days at a stretch, giving that service. Merwan, it was a beautiful, and at that point in my young Baba life, I didn't really, I was still putting all the faces and names together and relationships and trying to understand what was going on, but a very beautiful thing to see. So he also has, that beautiful tender side, was there also.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Bruce. Well, Wendy, Jai Baba.
Hey, Baba. Okay. I met Gary, I'm pretty sure it was 1991, close enough. And I was very nervous, my first trip, to say the least. And I remember checking in, and, Martin had been there before, and it was like you'd known him forever. He just made you feel so comfortable. Then the volleyball began, and I'm just not really good at those kind of situations. So I was an observer, and it was like, wow. But anyway, and over the years, going back and forth, I got to know Gary better and Mara. And anyway, I decided I wanted to go to India before I turned 50. I needed to do something on my own. So I took this big leap and I went, and Gary periodically would check in at one of the meal times. How you doing? And I'd say, I'm doing okay. Everything's good. Then I had something happen out at Marazad, which ended up me coming back and being on a stretcher. And there were 4 people that held each end of it, and Gary was one of them. And I will never forget the look on his face of compassion. He just put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Jai Baba." And I'll just never forget it. I just, hearing these stories, he had a huge heart, a very compassionate heart. And then we got to know Mara. And then I'm not quite sure how old Pia is. Is she around?
She's 17, she'll be 18 December 8th.
Okay, because I think she was quite tiny. And we brought clothes over from one of my grandchildren for her over the years. And so very grateful to have met Gary and his kindness over the years, for sure. And his sense of humor. Jai Baba.
If I could add something.
Yes,
So,
please, Martin.
following this, the story of Bruce going to Allura, I was there. I was there in 1980, and I went on one of these trips in August, and it was great. I mean, Gary was he was a great, moderator of the scenery and history and all this stuff. And we came back at the end of the day and stopped at Marisad. And then as we're leaving, so all the Mandali were out there to do their wave goodbye. And as we left, the cassette came on with some kind of rock and roll music. And as they were waving us off, the Mandali were kind of swaying and dancing and wiggling a little bit. It was just the most beautiful, humorous, surreal thing, seeing the disciples of Baba. It's like something out of Monty Python or something, where this humorous things happening, but it was just so beautiful and natural, and it was just hilarious. That's it.
Thank you. What a created scene for my mind's eye. Thank you, Martin. Jai Baba. Jai Baba, Wendy. Mihal.
Hi everyone.
Baba.
Well, I've been in Mehrabad quite a few times, but for short times. So I didn't get to know Gary as so very close, but I could see him from the outside. And the first thing that I so loved about him was his huge heart, wonderful temper, wonderful love for everyone, and sparkling and joyful, full of light. And very actually, he was like a very strong character, but he was very, very humble in his heart. It was these two things together. So one thing that I want to say is looking also outside, from the side, looking at this relationship of Gary and Eruj. It's Baba was giving Gary as a gift to Eruj, because everyone was so serious around them, and so that, and Gary was something else. So he could break up the whole seriousness that was around there and heaviness that was around there, and could make Eruj and everyone lighthearted and laugh. And he always had this different angle. He also was participating in the beautiful newsletter that Chicago took out with a lot of humor, and he was participating in that too. And what was so touching to see as when Mera came into his life, and she was quite young at that time, and it was such a beautiful romance, and it was just so beautiful to see how it embroidered itself and came about. And he was so appreciated and so happy with her. And I guess that he had many chances to be with other women, not to be with other women, but to choose other women. But he waited and waited and waited. And when she came, it was just so perfect for them both. I don't know what happened later on, but for them both, I could see that it was so beautiful to see. And he was so moved by her. He was so moved by her personality and her deepness. And I remember when he used to say words here and there, it was so beautiful to see. And it was also so very beautiful to see them as a couple when they got married, and also very beautiful to see him as a father and to be with his daughter. He was so proud of her. I mean, I'm talking only, when I saw them in Mehrabad, he used to shine when he went out with her on the motorcycle. It was he was so proud with his women, and also they were doing beautiful things in Mehrabad, because they were trying to get the community to interact with each other and to be there for each other. They tried to push that. It didn't work so well. And they also tried to enhance the women of the villages to support themselves and to have an income, which was very beautiful. So they, as a family, being very brave to bring up their child there, like another family that is there, Jessica and her husband. They also tried to put in to the community of the Indians and the residents as well. And I'm so sorry it did not. I'm so sorry that they had to leave. He once told me the story, what happened, how he left, why they left, what made them leave, and it really tore my heart. Another thing that I wanted to say was that in 1991, I was with my kids in Merabad. It was the first missile war in Israel. Everyone was shut off, and we were in Merabad. It was MRTT time, and my children got to play. They really enjoyed MRTT. They really enjoyed being there. They didn't come because they were Baba lovers. They're not Baba lovers. And I mean, Baba loves them, but he's taking care of them. And they're very beautiful children. One is still, and one is already went away. They had a chance to play the volleyball with all the screams and all the shouts. These afternoons used to be very, very spirited. And on my first visit to Merabad, 1988, I was going from Merabad to Japan in hope of doing something so I can come back to India. And that time, I think the Mandali told Gary to be in contact with me on letters to see what's happening to me there. Well, I didn't succeed in that. I came back to Israel much earlier than I thought, and I knew that I had to come back to Baba, and that was the beginning of this great love affair and beautiful gift that I got from Baba. So later, some years later, I don't remember what year, Craig and Gary came to visit Israel again. And they came to stay in my house with the kids for, I think it was 3 days. So I was living in Jerusalem. I now live in Tel Aviv. So I was living in Jerusalem. And we had a great time. We had a great time, and we ate together, and they were sleeping in the one room, and the kids, and one of my kids, the one who's not with us anymore, he played for them on guitar, and we of course went to all the holy places, and we went to Bethlehem, also to the where Jesus is said to be born, and so it was a very special time. I really love Gary. He had a huge heart, huge joy, and friendliness that was just bouncing out of him. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking of Eruch, what a gift from Baba Gary was for him, as much as Eruch was for Gary.
Thank you, Mia.
Yeah.
Thank you. What a beautiful share. I didn't realize that you got time together in your house. That's beautiful. You've had so many connections with him over the years.
Ruthie, I just wanted to jump in that Matt needs to leave soon. Okay. So could he
thank you, Faye,
share for a bit? And then I don't know if anyone else needs to leave soon, you know, but
yeah. All right. Well, let's have Matt speak. That's great. Thank you for there. Thank you. Jai Baba, Matt.
Hey, Jai Baba. I thank you everybody for all your remembrances so far. It's been really beautiful. I just wanted to, the thing I've been thinking about while I've been sitting here isn't really a story about Gary, but it's this like very specific idiosyncratic mannerism, of which he had many, but this one specifically was when you would be talking to Gary and you'd be in a story or just talking about stuff back and forth, and you say something and he's getting ready to talk again, but it was amusing or funny, and he's talking and he would crack that little smile and he'd be like, yeah, 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 and then put his finger up and then just keep talking. Then one is like what he was going to say, but that little moment of like amusement, like, yeah, 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 yeah. And then he would keep going. Like, it's just such a, it's just there like a little video in my brain. And I loved it so much. And he had such a special place in my heart. So I just want to share that little like piece of him, his like humanity. And then also, I'm sure many of you have been having memories of playing volleyball with Gary, and he just wants you to know that shot was garbage. Jay Baba.
Jay Baba, thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah. Oh, Baba. All right. Ron Greenstein. Jay Baba.
Jay Baba. My sharing is going to be a little different from most of the folks who maybe spent a lot more time with Gary than I did, although I enjoyed my times with Gary. This happened when I wasn't with Gary, but in fact was sitting in my office. I can't remember if this was in the 80s or the 90s, but I was reading Lord Mayhair over lunch, which was my habit in that particular time, and came across the anecdote about Baba listening to a guzzle from a guzzle singer, and it was a guzzle composed by a composer. I think his name was Jigger, but I'm not sure. If somebody wants to tell me who this is, that they're willing, please chip in. But this fellow, he was no longer around. He wasn't in the body anymore. But Baba loved this guzzle so much, he interrupted the performance and said that he was giving this composer liberation. And I had heard that story from Keshav Nigam about 10 years prior when I was at Mehewa Village. He happened to tell us that story. Maybe he was present at the time. I'm not really sure. I can't remember. But this is very impressive to me. And I had always appreciated that. And I won't go into this other anecdote that kind of ties in with that. But nevertheless, when I was finished reading the book, I went over to the computer and I got on the computer and somehow got directed to a copy of Mark Palmer's publication, The Whim. I think it was called The Whim. There were two different names. I can't remember if this was The Whim or whatever the other one was.
The Word.
The Word. Okay, it was either The Whim or The Word. I can't remember which one, but it doesn't really matter. In this particular magazine, Mark would give Gary his own column. So in each issue, Gary would be able to write whatever he was going to write. And so I was reading Gary's column. I just happened to just start reading Gary's column. Now, I was quite taken with it, and you'll understand why when I tell you what it was about. His column was describing having written something, some type of philosophical revelation or something that he had, some thinking that he was quite taken with. And he wrote it down, and he was so excited about it and enthusiastic. So he went to Erich, and he asked Erich if he could read him this thing that he had written. And so Erich said, "Sure, I want to hear it." And so Gary read this piece, this essay, and Erich looked at him very seriously, and he said, "Now, Gary, what you've written here is really spot on. This is the truth as I see it. You've really nailed it here. But I also want to let you know and kind of warn you that if you were to show this to somebody else, they would, oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. There was something very important about the previous anecdote about, I think the guy's name was Jigger, that Baba pointed out, besides that he liked the poem, the ghazal, and was giving a liberation. He made a point to say that this man was not advanced spiritually like a perfect master or anything like that. He said, but he just happened to hit upon the truth through his thinking and writing. So that's a very important thing, because this is basically what Erich was saying. He said, if you share this with other people, then it's quite likely they won't appreciate it. Why? Because you're Gary Kleiner. Who are you? Who are you to speak the truth? And so I thought, this was like perfect timing to hit on both of those things at the same time. It was great synchronicity, and something I carry with me, and I like to tell this anecdote because to impress upon people to just, say what you think the truth is. You never know, you might hit upon it. So I thank you all for sharing, and I thank Gary for his boldness and courage and sharing and his life with Baba, Jai Baba.
Gee, Baba. Yeah, Matt Shepard put down that it was called Kleiner's Corner.
There you go.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
DJ says the man was C-Mob, not Jigger. C-Mob. That's
D-Mob, right. I remember that now. Yeah, good.
Jay Baba. All right, we got hands up. Let's go. Ken Coleman, good to hear from you again.
Okay, another story, Gary's story. Well, this one is a very special story, I think. In the year 2003, this is much later than my other story, of course, Gary and Mara were having a workshop in their house, and it was called Death and Dying. And this was, Ann Spears was the moderator to this. And Gary said to me, would you pick up this girl in the MPC who's going to be coming to it? Her name is Hiral, and she's an Indian girl. You'll notice she's wearing jeans and she's skinny. And I went into that little book reading room and I saw her there. And I said, I'm taking a rickshaw over to Gary's. You want to come? He said, sure. And of course, I ended up marrying her. But before that, we barely talked, really, to be quite honest. But there was something that I felt was happening that was bigger than my ego. And I said, I just can't even believe I even said this to Gary. I said, Gary, don't be surprised if Hiral and I end up together. And he said, okay, we'll see. Well, later, Hiral and I started just offhand, we started to message each other when I went back to America, back and forth. And I invited her to come to, we were just almost every day chatting and stuff. And for an Indian woman to come to America single to see a guy, this is not like a normal thing. This is really difficult. So she was talking to Gary about it, and Gary said, I trust Ken. You can go, you will be safe. And if you need to get back to India, I will buy you a ticket. So, we had a 2-week-long ticket for her. She came and she stayed for the length of her visa, 4 months. And, then she came back when she was able to. And a couple of years later, we got married, after she got her graduate degree here. So, Gary had definitely a part in my meeting and being with my wife, my current wife right now. Yeah. One other thing, I'll just say something funny is, I'll just tell one more story, let other people tell, is that in the 1980s, we used to go, we didn't have like dinner in the MPC. We used to go into Ahmednagar and eat at the Ashoka for dinner. And Gary had this waiter named Daniel, who was his waiter. And we would go and have chicken tikkas and we'd have a beer or something. And we'd come back really late, like sometimes 11 o'clock, and the MPC was closed, but Gary would have the watchman open up the gate for me to go in. So in those days, Gary was very good friends with, spent a lot of time with Shelley, and Shelley came over to the MPC and we were telling her this story. And I said, if the guard wasn't there, I'd be locked out of the MPC. And I don't know how I'd get back in. And Gary said, well, Shelley, I think, could actually fit through the gate. She's small now, but she was smaller then. And we tested his hypothesis. We took Shelley and we actually got her through the gate of the MPC, holding her through the metal things. It was just, like crazy, yeah. So some funny, I tend to remember the funny things that we did, yeah.
Thank you. Tony, Jay Baba.
Jay Baba. So Gary was when it occurred to me, what can I share here? There's one story I can definitely share, but more personal stuff. Gary was so important to my inner life. And he was there almost every time I was in India, some 17, 18 times, I don't know. And, but at first, my first reaction to him was being a little annoyed. The questions he would ask of Erich. Come on now, Erich. I mean, aren't we just kidding ourselves? Or what about someone who says, who is this guy in India? And why is he even bothering with all this? How do we? And I would get really inwardly pissed off, come on. I get what he was doing. Okay. But at the time, that was like my introduction to Gary. What dawned on me today is the reason I guess Gary felt so important in my life is that in a certain sense, we were exact opposites or counterparts in a way. He was out there and he was active and he was loud and he was a brash and he was a hustler. All for Baba. But I was inward and I was quiet and I pretty much stayed behind the scenes except when I was singing. But even then, I closed my eyes and the fascination that I had with Gary. And of course, I've had to develop a lot of those traits over the years because they were in me. That's why I liked them and Gary so much. Someone talked about something that reminded me of this when I was there with my daughter, Clara, who was, how old was she then? I think this is when she was just 3. It may have been when she was 7, but he took her on, I believe, on his motorcycle. But he took her all around on a big adventure around Lower Meribad. But I don't have many specific stories. Well, except, of course, him in his office with the sign, the Kleiner, he's right there with you. And he was for everyone. He was right there with you. The one story that I want to share, and it touches me deeply. There's a little background. Back in 89, 90, 91, 2. I don't remember. Somewhere I have the dates, I'm sure. I had a dream of Baba. And I was on the phone in New York trying to get through to India. And the connection was really, really bad. And I'm pressing my ear up to the phone. And next thing you know, it's like I zoom through the phone wires and I'm in the trust office. And at first, there's someone I know. There are a bunch of teachers. And they're all punching in for the day, like school teachers, and they're going out. People I know here, not in India. Next thing, I'm inside, which I think of now as Mani's office, and Baba is there, and he's dictating points to Erich for me. And there are 3 points, and he wants me to write down. He's got 10 points that he wants to give me that he wants me to write about. And I was not particularly a writer. I wrote songs, you know, and I was now a press officer at the UN, but that's reporting. It's, you know. So anyway, he dictates the first point to Erich, and Erich wants to go on. Baba gives him the second point, and Erich is going to tell me, and I go, wait a minute, because I want to get the first one, you know. And then so he gives me the second one, and I write it down, and it comes to the third one, and I go, Erich, wait a minute. And I don't know if I've ever seen Erich annoyed in real life, but he was a little bit annoyed. It's like, you know, Baba's giving me something to tell. And Baba turns to Erich and said, no, he's taking his time to get each point down so he can, you know, develop it. And then gesturing to me, he says, he's going to be a great writer. So I woke up and I thought, well, that's an encouraging dream. I never thought of being a writer. But at some point over the years, I thought, well, what were those 10 points? And I tried to intuit what those 10 points were. And I was contributing a lot to the listserv at time, a lot of poetry, which I didn't know I could write, but the listserv would cut off the lines arbitrarily. And so I would cut them where I wanted them. And anyway, so I developed the 10 points. I introduced the subject, illustrated it with a poem, and I had the whole book written, and it's like that. And then my ex-wife, Clara's mother, was going to India, and Zeke and I couldn't go, but we paid for her to take Clara. And I made a chapbook version of that larger book with little excerpts from each of the 10 chapters. And I said, could you give this to Erich when you get there? Because after all, it was he who was dictating the points to me. And when she came back, I asked if she had, and she had. Oh, but this was August of 2001. So she came back around the time of Erich's birthday, and shortly after that, Erich went to Baba. And my friend Cindy Andriazzi calls me up at some point. She had also been there. She said, I have a picture for you. It turns out she was there when Erich got my book, How Love Thrives, The Journey of the Modern Mystic, and the little excerpts. And he was sitting back reading my book. Well, with one hand holding, you know, his chin. And Gary turns to Cindy and says, Cindy, quick, you've got a camera. Take a picture for Tony. So right after Erich's passing, this picture arrives in the mail of Erich reading the book that, in my experience, he helped write, you know, he helped happen. Yeah, I was so touched by Gary, what he did, you know. Other stories, I guess, for me, pale. Jay Baba. My other stories, I mean.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jay Baba. I'm going to jump to Carol and Myron. I think you have some wonderful things to share. So if you would, Jay Baba.
Well, I'm just going to tell 2 little stories about Gary. When I met Gary, it was 1983. It was my first trip to India. And I was with my girlfriend, and he saw us. We were traveling with this other woman who complained about India. And so he came walking down the hallway. He saw Helen and I, and he goes, what? There's 2 girls from Chicago that I don't know? I said, you don't know everybody. He goes, yeah, but traveling is like marriage. Where'd you get her? Oh, yeah. So later on, we always talked about love and marriage. That was our theme. And in 1984, in the summer, he was over one day having food. And he said to me, oh, Carol, what are we going to do? Who are we going to marry? I said, I have no clue, and I'm not getting married. He goes, what can we do? And he was like walking around my apartment, lamenting and lamenting. So finally he says, I think we should marry the president of our fan club. I said, yes, I could do that. So I wrote a note to Baba and put it in the tomb. I had left a couple of months later. And when I came home, I was organizing my astrology charts. I had a whole file, and one of them fell on the floor. I picked it up, and I thought, ew, his Mars is conjunct my Venus. Maybe I'll date this guy. So Gary was already back in India, but I called him and told him, oh, I think I might have found the president of my fan club. So I married that guy a year and a half later, and Gary was in our wedding. His mother was, my husband's mother and Gary's family are from the same area of the world. So there's a family structure to that. And it's not that great when you want to marry outside of the tribe, which I was. So the night we got married at 2:30 in the morning. Bruce was the minister. And at the last minute, we got married in the Baba Center. I thought, no, I think I'll just make a right, go to the bus stop and go home. But Gary took his thumb and pushed it into my back and we went in. And when we got in there, my mother-in-law, soon to be, said in Ukrainian to my now husband, "Why are you doing this to me?" And Gary heard her and went and told Bruce, "If you have that part in the marriage where somebody objects, take that out." I'm sure you remember that, Bruce. It's lasted for 36 years. And the other little story I'd like to tell.
What year was that, Carol, that you got?
1996. Yeah, president of my fan club. Still is too. He's quite the fool about what to do.
Gary is a matchmaker.
Huh?
He's a matchmaker, Gary, for two people already.
Oh, we talked about love for years. That was our subject. But the other thing I'd like to say that I learned from him was the story he told me that Erich, well, he told me when he first came to India, he was staying in the old Pilgrim Center by himself. And so he noticed that the night guardsmen, didn't lock the gate. So he was so kind of, like, what the hell, maybe something is going to happen and what am I going to do? But you should lock the gate. So he, sort of made some suggestions, but the guy didn't do it. So he went to Erich and he told Erich, I don't feel comfortable staying in there. He doesn't even lock the gate. And Erich told him, well, why don't you tell him to lock the gate? And Gary said, well, who am I to tell him? That guy was with Baba and I should go tell him to lock the gate. And Erich told him, go find out who you are and then go tell him to lock the gate. And that was such a lesson for me in life too. He gave me information that helped me in a very nice way. So that's all I have to say.
Carol, you remember that person was a very imposing personality. He had not only a history with Baba, but he was a well-known thief and dangerous person who had come into Baba's orbit and who was essentially tamed through that experience with Baba and came to work at Mehrabad. And one of the duties, and perhaps the first duty given to Gary at Mehrabad, was to manage this person.
Oh,
and
God.
So then ensues the part of the story where things he's not doing things he should be doing, and Erich has to tell him, you find out who you are, and then tell him what to do.
Oh,
wow.
well, that
Beautiful
makes
stuff.
sense. Go
Yeah.
find who you are. And then go to, well, I use that in my life, even though it's difficult. That's all I have to say.
Oh, Carol, thank you so much. I'm so glad you shared. What beautiful stories. All right. Is there anyone else that would like to share?
What happened to Jonathan Ramsden?
I
Is he not there
know.
anymore?
I think I'm sorry, but I think he had to go. I sent him an email.
Oh,
I mean, a message asking him to share, but it looks like he had to go.
So I was just
Mhm.
I was just thinking of a couple things.
Oh, there's Nan too.
So all through the 80s, and I don't even remember when Gary's mother died, Jenya, but I can tell you that Gary loved his mother unbelievably. Like this like in the 1980s, whatever, more than anybody in the world. And I used to bring, these were, before emails and stuff, I used to bring back letters from India and bring them over to to his mother. And, these were long letters, and she would just be like, well, Ken, let me make you some food, which was always like a 5-course dinner, right? Meal, as she was reading the letters. And when she got sick with cancer, I mean, Gary was really depressed. And when she died, I mean, Gary was depressed for a couple of years. It was like really hard for him. And he never used to be in Chicago in the winters because, he would come in the summers, but in the winters he wouldn't come but this was different because his mother was sick, and he stayed in Chicago for a while. And I remember on Christmas, this was like the only Christmas I think he was in Chicago. We went to a movie, and I don't remember what the movie was, but on Christmas, maybe nowadays people go to movies on Christmas. Back then, the movie theaters were empty. And Gary always had a ball with him, like people who know Gary, he always had a ball. And we would go to the movie theater, and I think there were like maybe a couple other people. We'd be throwing the ball back and forth across the whole movie theater in Chicago during Christmas. And, I just remembered that it was kind of like one of these things that lifted his spirit a little bit, because he was depressed about his mom, and just kind of getting out, and nothing made him happier than throwing a ball around. But yeah, it was funny. In the movie theaters we used to do this. Yeah.
Thanks, Ken. And Nan, did you have your hand up, sweet?
Yeah, just some quick things. I used to be over there for long stretches, and Bruce, you and Gary were like we were like different species, but you used to make me laugh a lot. I appreciate you, the two of you, the brotherliness and the humor between you was always really was a great gift and lifted my spirits. And I saw Gary, how much he helped, particularly the young people. And one young man came from abroad with only $1, with this naive idea that he was going to get a job in a gas station in Ahmednugger to support himself. And so Gary and I worked out different things to keep him there and make it possible. And he was probably doing that all the time behind the scenes, but that was one of the times we did it together. And one time out of the blue, Gary said, "Come in here, Nan, I got to read something to you." And I don't know if he got it, that I really didn't understand it. He was so unfamiliar. I appreciated him he was just like nobody I'd never met. And he read to me the chapter in the Enneagram about 8s. And if any of you studied the Enneagram, it's very rare for 8s to get involved in the spiritual life. That's just, there are lots of 6s, lots of 5s, lots of 7s. I mean, most of the other types, but 8s aren't usually drawn to meditation centers, to, spiritual communities. So that was just such a nice gift that he kind of explained himself to me, and we talked about it, so, anyway, the Bible world, sometimes I think they knew a lot before we knew. We were probably judging each other when they used to say we were gems. We had to grow up to get past, maybe at least I had to grow up to get past all our differences to see what they were seeing back then. But there sure are a lot of remarkable, lovely, unusual people in the Bible world, of which, and Gary was, on top of being all those things, was so lucky to have been with Erich all those times. The other thing is, I used to be, like somebody else said, I used to get the opportunity to sit at the teas in Ahmednugger with Erich, and Gary had the ability not to be in awe. I could be relaxed around Erich for maybe the first few months, but once I really got who Erich was, I think I was probably more and more tongue-tied, whereas Gary was never tongue-tied. So he could just ask questions and get the conversation flowing. So that was a real gift to all of us. So, and then we have these, as you saw, we have these YouTubes forever to watch. I mean, I didn't even know they were out there. I just, of Gary talking about Erich, which are pretty remarkable. So that's it.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Nan. Jay Baba, and thank you for the photos that you sent and the links that you sent. I have like a quick video that I wanted to share of some photos that Mara had sent So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and then we'll just see if there's anybody that wants to share at the end. So here we go. Jai Baba.
It's said that it's the sun that brightens up the skies, but I know better. It's the reflection from your eyes. Somebody's singing through the heavens and lighting up the sun. Burning off the darkness, and you are that someone. It's said by the general public that true love cannot be claimed, but I know better, 'cause I'm crazy for your name. Somebody's dancing across the heavens, figure skating around the sun. Shining like forever, and you are that someone. No doubt about it, no discussion, no debate. All that glitters isn't gold, but Baba, you're truly great. It said we all are sinners and not worthy of God's glance, but I know better, 'cause I glimpse part of your dance. Somebody's moving behind the curtain, pulling strings and having fun. Silently sowing seeds of love, and you are that someone. They say all life's a gamble. Well, I bet all my chips on you, 'cause I know better. You'll always see me through, no matter how the wheel is turning. You're the center of the drum. Conducting the universal rhythm, yeah, you are that someone. Ain't no doubt about it, I'm crazy for your smile. You're my father, mother, angel, Lord, and I'm your wayward child. Said that it's the sun that brightens up the skies. Well, I know better. It's the reflection from your eyes. Somebody's singing through the heavens and lighting up the sun. Burning off the darkness, and you are that someone. Burning off the darkness, and you are that someone.
Ruthie, that is so beautiful. Thank you so much for putting that together. Thank you, Ruthie. That was
Hey,
just beautiful.
you
Thank
know, it was Mara's.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mara, for sending all those amazing photos. Just,
Yeah.
I can't even speak about it because it's just been such a wonderful experience for me to have that opportunity. Thank you for saying something fair. If there's no one else, does anyone else want to say anything?
Just to ask, do you know where we can get that? We'll see the video we can see on this program, I guess, but where we can get that Jim Myers song, That Someone? So beautiful.
Oh, isn't that? Oh gosh. I'll find out, Ken, and I'll let you know. I can't remember where. I just, Baba just put it up there for me. So it just happened so quickly. I'm just grateful. All right. Let's see. Martha, did you want to?
Yes, I wanted to ask something, and I don't know if you feel comfortable, Bruce, but you were there the day that he passed. Would you be willing to share just a couple of highlights of that day, how it unfolded, if you're comfortable doing that, please?
Sure. I'll give you just a synopsis of some events to try to give you a sense of the rapidity of the sequence of events, and also to demonstrate, how Baba-ful and beautiful it was. I'm sorry. I just need a moment.
Take what you need.
Okay. So, Gary, a couple of years before he passed, he developed some serious health difficulties. He had prostate cancer. He had cancer in his left eye. He developed Alzheimer's. These all happened at about the same time. And through all that, his spirit was, he took it with such equanimity, and didn't make a big deal about it, and with poise, and I'll just say this, that in terms of his Alzheimer's, what Gary, I think the predominant thing that he lost in that experience was nouns, right? He couldn't he couldn't name things. And to a greater extent over time, people's names, but he still knew who they were, and he still knew the context and the importance of their story and all that stuff, but he increasingly needed prompting to know those things. And then when he was very close to passing, he just didn't have those kinds of things. And you can imagine how frustrating that would be to have that experience. But he never expressed frustration over that. Okay. As he about 3 weeks before he passed away, I hadn't seen him in a little while. I hadn't seen him maybe in a couple of weeks, and I thought, here, I'll throw in another Gary story. I saw him, Gary loved to play the game, although for him it wasn't so much a game as sort of a savant ability to guess your weight, right? I don't know if he did this with women, but he was very good. And every day at Maribon, on his way back from the PC in the morning to his room, he would stop at the go down, the tool shed, and weigh himself on the scales there. So he could guess your weight within a pound, definitely, no questions asked. And anyway, that day I saw him and I couldn't believe how much weight he had lost. It was unfathomable to me. And I couldn't make a fair guesstimate of what I thought his weight was, because it would be too shocking to say. So I said, Gar, what do you got? 135, 135 pounds. This is a man whose average weight as an adult was 178 or 175, something like that. And he goes, no, I think it's 120, right? 120 pounds. He was so thin. But that was the first time I had heard him even mention it. He was obviously in a state of declining health, but he wasn't announcing it to the world, and he wasn't complaining about it. I mean, if you saw him, you would know that he was not, you can only hide your own physical discomfort so much. And he wasn't in a lot of pain. He wasn't having a lot of suffering. And as he, from that point on, it was just about that time that Mara returned from Florida, and everybody was sort of, kind of on the program now, like what's going on with Gar, and doctor's appointments, started happening and all that stuff. And at every step along the way, so it goes like this. Let's say 2 weeks before he passed away, he finally got an appointment to see his oncologist. And they did some tests and things like that. And even then, Gary was not, he wasn't in pain really. But from that moment, the oncologist said, well, I think what we're seeing is probably stage 4 cancer, lung cancer, esophageal cancer, and lymph nodes, right? But we need further tests. So a week later, further tests. And he finally gets in to see the specialist, who says, there's nothing that we can do about this because it's spread to these organs, to your lungs, esophagus, and lymph nodes. And in the light of that information, we made contact with hospice. And that was a Friday doctor appointment. I think I'm remembering correctly. Scott, or Fair, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But so we made contact with hospice, and this will give you an interesting thing. So let's say 2 weeks before he passed away, I went over there one night, and I brought a pizza, sausage pizza. And Gary was an omnivore, so vegetarians and vegans in the audience, I apologize for having mentioned it, but it's important because it was a substantial pizza. And he went through 2 big, hefty slices of pizza. That was 2 weeks before that. A week before he died, my wife Jeannie and I brought over that same pizza, and he went to eat it and he couldn't swallow it, and he had to spit it up. And that was, he had cancer of the esophagus, and that's the effect of that, is your esophagus closing like that. He's not complaining in any of this. It's just not happening. Finally, so the hospice nurse comes over on, the intake nurse comes over on Saturday. We have our meeting, we can make plans. We're going to take care of Gary at his house. We go to the pharmacy and get all these hospice medications and all that stuff. And the way hospice works, or one of the ways it works, is if you can swallow, if you can ingest medications yourself, then you get taken care of at home. That's how it is. So we made all those arrangements. We had liquid or ways to liquefy the various medications and give them to him. We tried that. He didn't like them, not so much from an ingestion point of view, as they were just bitter and awful. But then it also immediately, just overnight, he couldn't swallow it anymore. We conferred with the nurse again about how to make it possible to give him something on Sunday. On Monday, the first real visit from a hospice nurse to his house, and the nurse, the conclusion right away is, he can't swallow. You can't take care of him here. It's just like boom, boom, boom. And still, he's not, he has, his discomfort was, certain times, if he twisted it in such a way, he's gonna, like that, he'd feel something. But he wasn't in a state of constant pain or anything. So anyway, so this is Monday morning around 10 o'clock, hospice nurse. No, he's got to go to the hospice facility. Oh, at noon, the hospice car, their ambulance arrives. By 1 o'clock, he's in a room at the hospice facility, the same one where who's from Schenectady, New York? Old Bob.
Darwin Shaw.
Yeah. It's the same place where Darwin passed away, and a couple of other nice folks. Anyway, so by one o'clock, he was in his room. By 1:15, the nurse who was in and just sort of, observed him a little bit. And within 30 minutes, he had a PICC line on, in his arm, and was getting the things that he really needed to be comfortable. And even though he hadn't been complaining and all that stuff, you could tell that, his furrowed brow and, all that stuff, within an hour, he became completely and utterly relaxed and comfortable. And he actually fell into a very deep sleep, which is something he probably hadn't had in quite some time. And he was breathing deeply and fully, and he was very comfortable. He looked very comfortable. That was Monday. Tuesday was essentially like that. His brother Jerry arrived from Chicago. People with him at that time were Scott and Ann Edelman, myself, my wife Jeannie, Mara and Sophia, of course, the Browns on the telephone, Alan Wagner called. It was so beautiful. And then, sorry. we were, there was a lot of laughter and joy in the room. Jerry was telling these childhood stories, and it was just a riot. Everybody was just having a great time. Gary was happy to be having these experiences, throwing the ball around, and it was everything. It was all that stuff combined. We all know what that is. And then in the evening on Saturday, they had increased the dosage of medicines and things, and it really slowed down. And Mara said, I wasn't here for this part, obviously, because middle of the night, but Mara was up in the middle of the night, and she said that she was spent about an hour just kind of reviewing Gary's life, with him, even though he was asleep at the time, but she just kind of gave him the beautiful life, story. And then she said, if you can work it out, it'd be great if you could pass away before we were all awake in the morning, because it was hard on Sophia. And then the next thing, we know, she wakes up at 7, and Gary just passed. He was comfortable, and he was happy. And the other thing I want to say about that stay in the hospice was it was so sweet. It was just the sweetness. And it was a very, very beautiful thing. And here's one last thing. Some of you, or probably many of you, know Debbie Nordine, who was my sister-in-law. And she had just had esophageal cancer herself, and had just gotten out of the hospital, or was nearing the end of a 35-day stay in the hospital. And the night before, or 2 nights before Gary died, Peter, Debbie's husband, Peter Nordine, brought a Baba card, which he had received from Rick and Cheryl. And they had asked Peter, they sent him a bunch and asked him if they would go and bring this card to Gary at the hospice. So he did. And they put it above his bed, right? So it was on the wall. It's not a very big card, like that. And so after Gary died on Wednesday morning, one of the hospice nurses came in and spoke to Mara and said, just this morning I was reading about Meher Baba. And she said, that picture above his bed, I have that right here in my pocket, because I've been taking care of a woman in the hospital who has the thing. And she gave me this card. Of course, it was Debbie, Baba, beautiful, beautiful circle of love. But that's what Baba does. He loves. very beautiful. Thanks for asking me about that, Marta.
Bruce,
Okay,
thank
bye-bye.
you so much. I can't tell you how much this has meant to me, and I'm sure it's meant to everyone, and that it's taped for everyone to hear. I mean, it's a testimony to Gary's adoration for Baba and Baba's adoration for all of us, that we can share all this together. And Bruce, I don't know you, but I know you, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Jai Baba.
And great friendship and great
Thank you.
friends and
I just wanted,
support. Wow.
I'm sorry, that was just amazing. I appreciate the share. I would like to ask Fair if she would share some. Would that be okay?
Yeah, I do see Michelle's raised her hand and stuff, but I just thank you so much, Bruce. Wow, thank you. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Fair, and I'm Gary is my brother-in-law, but recent days I've been thinking, you know what, we don't have to be limited by laws anymore. He's my brother. That's what it feels like. So I just wanted to share with you. So many of you know Sophia or Pia when she was little, and now she's not little anymore. She's a teenager, and she blows my mind. Her love and her strength and her courage. And after Erich passed away, as Ken was describing, you know, that scenario where you're outside the MPC at night and the guards there, and Gary would pull a couple of plastic chairs out, and I would sometimes sit across from him and just chat. You know, he was part of my family at that time, because even if he and Mary weren't maybe married, but they were in love. And so he was, you know, like my brother. And I said to him, Gary, how could anything be better than what you've lived with Garrett? I mean, this is it, right? Like, what can life be like after this? And he said, yes, but this might be the stem, and who knows what flower will come from this. And as I shared with a few of you recently, when I told that story to Gary a few days before he passed away, Scott was there, Scott McCaig, who was spending a lot of time with Gary, and Scott said, that's Sophia. That's the flower, Sophia. And I don't remember if Gary was nodding or he was just hearing that, but absolutely in these past few years, anyone who's talked to Gary knows that his favorite topic was Sophia. He loved his daughter with all of his heart. And it's incredible to see her, you know, like, just I can't say I've met a teenager before that just like is so full of love and presence. So I would love to put in the chat. She recently gave a talk at her boarding school or in Asheville. She got to spend quite a lot of time with Gary the past few years. He would go to every single, you know, field hockey game, and she was part of different sports teams, and he would be there cheering her on. And as he said, like, I always, you know, I'm standing there, Sophia, but as is a few days before he passed away, is like, next time I think I'm going to have to be sitting down. So he was always cheering her on. She gave this speech. Now, I don't know what it was like for you guys, right, when you came to Baba, but like when I was a teenager, I had Baba's picture in my locker, and I was like so shy. People would like see Baba's picture and think I was weird. You know, I was like very shy about, and she's like in front of her, she gave an all school speech, and all of it was about Baba, and it was dedicated to Gary. So I'm going to try and get that link while other people are sharing and put it in the chat if you guys want to see it. And lots of love to you guys. I'm also going to put my phone number in the chat. You know, it just means so much to hear stories. So if anybody has extra stories and wants to share them, please call me up. I just hope we can all stay in community together. All right. Lots of love to you guys. Thank you.
And so much love to you, Fair. You know, I'm so grateful for your ending about community, because that's one of the videos I was looking at with Mara and Gary, talking about community and how fortunate we are. And just to be able to bring Baba before us in this way is just, it's just boggling my mind and my heart. Okay, I did want to ask Scott if he wanted to say something. You don't have to, it's up to you. Hi, I can't hear you though.
You can't still?
I can now, yes.
Yes, okay.
Hey, Bob.
I haven't thought of anything to add, really. I've been with Gary, of course, most intensely the last 3 years. Here in Asheville, he living around the corner, and Ann and I increasingly needing to manage his affairs for him. And so I'm very much taken by the struggle that he went through, and not in responding to his illness, which, as other people have said, was remarkable, or his illnesses, I should say. But yeah, his real inner struggle. And yeah, and in the end, he was with Mara and Pia. We call Sophia Pia. They were staying, in the house for the last several days, and then in the hospice on a little cot. And that was really what he wanted at the end. He really wanted to be together with them. And it was just Baba arranged things in Mara's schedule such that it could happen. And so that I know that he was overjoyed with that. And on the struggles he'd had, more of on a deep level, I think were resolved. And the most beautiful comment that I received, I think I put something in the WNC list, Western North Carolina Baba list, that he'd passed that morning. And actually, I only got one response, and that was from Ward Parks, who said, "I believe he will be well received." Jai Baba.
Oh, Jai Baba. Scott, that's fabulous. Jai Baba. Thank you. All right, Marvin and Michelle, thank you for your patience. You're up.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to say that that Gary's life is definitely living on. As well, last night I had a conversation with my son, Aaron, and he said, of all things, he joined a volleyball team at college. And I was just so thrilled that that experience of communing with others that Gary so propagated lives on. And it's just impressed me. And thank you. Yeah, he and Pia are good friends, and they've spent many hours together at the Sahavas. So.
And going to Mayor Center. So yeah, so his love, Gary's love goes on, and I can't really talk because it's too much. I'm sorry. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
And thank you, Bruce, for sharing the end and all the stories. It was really beautiful. And, every day I'm thinking about Sophia and Jay Baba.
Jay Baba.
And
Jay Baba. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
Ruthie?
Yes, dear.
I just want to say one thing
Please.
for everybody. If you get a chance to see Sophia's talk, it's one other aspect of it that is so heartening and I really received with a kind of wonder that was very surprising, which is, the next generation, they're fine. They're really fine. Bob is really, he has the situation well in hand.
Jay Baba, you're so right. Now we have Margaret Bernstein. Jay Baba, Margaret.
Jay Baba, I'm having trouble with my phone. I can't
no worries.
show the video, and I'm not very photogenic right now anyway, because I just had knee surgery, but I'm just absolutely thrilled to see all of you. It's just like a big heartwarming. And I realized as I'm sitting here, laying here, that I'm wearing the shirt that Sophia designed for Youth Sahabas this year. And that was totally accident. I just happened to be wearing it. Julian, my son, Julian, who's now almost 26, believe it or not, brought it back from Youth Sahabas. And anyway, so I'm wearing it. And I just realized, all these connections that we don't, Bob is connecting us. We don't always see all these. This was not purposeful that, I'm going to wear this shirt that Sophia designed. But I connected through Gary, mostly through music, which being a musician probably is not surprising to people, but that's where I felt the heart connection with Gary through music after Emertithi of 95. A whole bunch of us were jamming in, I guess, where the kitchen, I don't know, the song that I really remember that he was really mostly getting into was Sympathy for the Devil. And I had recorded it and I was supposed to send him a copy. I don't know where the copy is now. So eventually I'll have to find that. But it was lots of Baba energy. He was singing very animated. There were other people singing very animated. And you could just feel Baba, and Mira was there. That was right at the beginning when they started falling in love. And you could just feel Bob. It was one of those moments, Amritithi so intense. And it was one of those moments when just Baba was so strong through all of that. And Gary was a part of that. And even though I'd met Gary almost 10 years before that, the thing about Gary, as everybody's mentioned here, he had a beautiful, incredible heart. And I think Mira really helped to bring that out. And I mean, it's such a beautiful thing that they were married and had Sophia, but also, he had this tough persona, the volleyball. The tough persona, but really that was all a disguise for the beautiful Baba heart he had inside. So we're just so privileged and honored to have known him. And we're also such a great gratitude that we're all can be together sharing. And then also, even if we're not here in the room right now together, Zoom room, that Baba has still connected us all together. Like he says, like beads on one string, and that Baba's love keeps on going through. And I feel like when I heard that Gary passed, I'm like, well, Gary's right here with me. I felt like he was so still with me and with all of us, and the love keeps on going. So thank you so much for letting me share and for all being here. Jai Baba.
Jay Baba, Margaret. It's so good to hear from you. So wonderful to hear your voice. I can hear your music in my ear. Marcia, Jay Baba.
Hi. I met Gary in 1994 on my first trip to India, and I was happy because I'm from Chicago. So he made me feel really nice to know that he was there. And I just remember now that I did play volleyball, but I couldn't remember But the greatest, funniest thing was when I was getting ready to go home, I'd been shopping a little bit at Mayor Taylor's and I couldn't fit all my stuff in the suitcase to go home. So he came to rescue with a suitcase, and in trade, I was going to carry a suitcase back for him. And he comes with this big giant suitcase. And I had all this stuff, and I'm at the airport, like, I wonder what's in the suitcase. But I made it home safe. But it was like funny, you know, it's like, well, anyway. But I met his father once, but I didn't really know him that well, but he's in my heart, yeah. Okay. Chibaho.
Jai Baba. Well, whew, it's been a nice long time with everyone, most especially with our beloved Baba, and him bringing forward this amazing, amazing person into our lives. I met Gary in 85. We didn't really have a connection, but I watched him and I took a lot of pictures of the volleyball game because it just seemed to be, there was so much energy involved, and all the men that had arrived we just got there that day and they ran out onto the court. And anyway, I'm just grateful to have had this opportunity today as well to be with everyone in Baba's love. So let's have a moment of silence together. Jai Baba. If you'd like to unmute, Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai.
Baba
EJ.
Avatar.
Baba EJ.
Hey Baba, thank you.
Thank you, Ruthie. Thank you.
No,
Thank
it's all, you know who it is. We know who's in charge here. All right. If anybody
Jai
wants,
Baba, much love.
How can we see some of the photos that you posted of Gary? They were beautiful.
oh, I know. Gosh, Mara, thank you. Well, I'm going to stop the
Look at the
recording.
pictures of him while you were showing them.
Thanks, especially Bruce and Fair.
Yeah.